Okay.
So here we are. This is a Wynola Water District living history recording, and we have with us today Tim Taschler, who did a fantastic job for many years running the Wynola Water District, and we give him a lot of credit for really rescuing the water district from really financial ruin and takeover by a government agency. And then we have with us Albert Simonson, who's here, who has, in my opinion, not only is he a crazy rocket scientist who I like very much, but he also knows a heck of a lot about our system. So I'm going to turn this over to Tim. I'm going to point the camera at Albert, and we're really here to just kind of have a dialogue about our water system, and we'll be able to show a map as necessary and point out different things. So with that, let me turn it over to Tim Taschler.
Okay, thank you. The thing I think that's important to get Albert to discuss, which he's discussed over the years with me, but I don't retain it the way I should, and this recording will be helpful, is when we took over, I know Albert did a lot of study and testing with how the wells, especially 7, 9, and 10, that are all, I think, on the same supply line, how they operate and how they affect each other with pressure, backflow, whatever. And so I thought if Albert could start by talking a little bit about 7, 9, and 10 and how maybe they shouldn't all run at the same time or how the layout is, and just maybe give us a bit of a brain dump on the topography of those 3 wells.
One of the problems that we have had over the years is that, as you say, those 3 pumps are on simultaneously. Signal went out over AT&T copper wires and turned them all on and off simultaneously. The problem with that is that the pressure was very high in that feed line, and it cost money to pump, to overcome that friction in the pipes. And so our electric bills were higher. And I think you, Tim, have seen that with some changes, mainly by running at night during the super off-peak hours, mainly between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, also between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that we've been able to bring down our electricity costs. And that's worked out really well. I don't know how much, I think most of the credit goes to using super off-peak hours on the timer, but part of it is also that we're not pushing against this enormous feed line pressure, which we had before, and which did in fact cause a fracture on Glenside Road at one time, which we had to dig up and repair. Now, this is all changing now, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. We're gone with AT&T. In fact, I think it would be safe now to let AT&T know that we're not needing those lines anymore. We might want to check with Kent and make sure it's okay with him, but we are now running wirelessly as of today.
Yeah, we could put up just for a moment, just on the screen where people can actually see the system that we now have. And this just shows you, for example, well number 11, which is currently running. Is part of a transitional test that Kent is doing to just really give us a sense as to what is going on in the system. And we could see the depths, we could see the voltages, and all of these things as well that we didn't have before.
Now, a very good and welcome change that has occurred, and this took a little bit of work on Kent's part, Kent of Southland Water, all the wells will run sequentially. So it will start with well number 3, then it'll go to well 7, then to 9. And if the tanks still need water, it'll go to 11. And then it'll go back to perhaps 3 or 7. And if the tanks fill up, then if there's no fires going on or heavy usage, it will interrupt that sequence and turn off all the wells. And then when it comes time to restart the wells, because the tanks have dropped down, it'll just go back to, say, 7 as an example, and let it run through its sub-cycle.
Nice.
So this means that only one well will be pumping water through the supply line at any given time. And so that I think will make you happy. And
so 7, 9, and 10 all feed into one supply line that then feeds into the storage tank. And well 11 runs by itself, and well 3 has its own line into the pipe, into the tank.
So basically what you're saying is you're looking at this cluster of wells right here. They all feed into the tank, and then this well 11, which is blinking on the screen, it's a single pipeline that feeds into the tank.
Now it too is problematic because that particular pump is overdimensioned for its duty. Or another way of putting it is that it's too powerful, delivers too much water for the size of its supply line. So it runs at a very high pressure, back pressure. And you remember, Tim, that we had that problem that water erupted in the Young's driveway, and we had to go down very far in order to uncover that. And we had to put in a number of elbows there in order to do a repair and cover it with sand. And that's where I discovered that wet sand is almost as good as mortar if you want to pack rigidly around pipes. It really works splendidly.
Is the well 11, does that pump, is it variable speed to where you could slow it down?
No,
it's not.
It's either on or off.
Okay, so it's not a variable speed pump.
No, none of the wells are variable speed. Only the boost pumps are variable speed.
Would it make sense that should we ever have to replace well 11 that we change it out to a variable speed motor to then regulate the flow so you don't have that high back pressure?
I think it would be an unnecessary complication. We've never had a motor failure ever that I recall, Tim. We've had pump failures galore, but never a pump failure. So I don't think it really matters with, turning it on suddenly and wrenchingly. It seems to work all right. The pump can take it. It's designed for that. And our electronics at the wellheads are pretty simple. And we have motor savers to watch over the whole process. It all seems to work very well.
Okay. Now, but Jim, can you...
11, I have had to take a drastic measure by actually throttling the outlet of the pump in order to increase the pressures in the iron pipe that go down the bore and alleviate slightly, very slightly, the pressure in the PVC line that goes to the pump house. And I've already told Buddy about that, so he knows not to mess with that setting when he puts in the new flow meter.
Okay. Jim,
but if we ever replace that pump, we could put in one that has fewer stages. We should pull up the performance map and do a new selection. And in fact, while Kent is running this thing down to such a low depth, I'm going to go and measure the back pressure and see how that looks, and that'll help me to judge all that. But anyway, that's all pretty good. The main thing I want that concerns me right now as we move forward is our relationship with DEH and now the State Water Board. We have some outstanding issues there. Historically, we've sort of, just gone through as a volunteer group and fixed up stuff ad hoc, but we're changing all that now. But you're the only one who ever went around with an inspector to all the well sites, all the well heads and to the pump house. And she spent 4 hours with you, Victoria Nguyen. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
By Win.
Win?
Yeah, I've seen the list. And in fact, I brought that up today. This is starting with pump 2 shut down, and Tim pretty much got acknowledgement from her. And so maybe, and then we have things like bringing pump 5 back on, well 5 back online in the future. Maybe turn it back to Tim so he can kind of address some of the questions that he had of you that'll kind of touch on some of those things.
Now, I've read that report, so I'm familiar with it. I sent it on to the board so they could see it. I particularly wanted them to notice that there was an inspection of the storage tanks. And as I recall, there were no issues, no major issues anyway with the storage tanks. And there's a myth that floats around here that you have to send divers in every 5 years in order to inspect the water tanks. I think that's hooey. And when asked for a citation on that, all I get is ASME, which is irrelevant to us. But I think the report that Victoria put out was generally favorable. Is that your impression? You talked to her personally, and you know much better than I do.
Yeah, our reports were in good shape. We did everything that DEH requested that we do. The thing that'll be tricky for you guys to figure out is, as DEH has left the picture as of July 1st of last year, and now it's the State Water Board, I don't know who you're going to build a relationship with or how that relationship will get built. I had it where I could go right to DEH, the head woman who ran the program for our small system, and she always answered questions and directed us to do what seemed to be the most appropriate for our situation. When they pressed us on that idea that wells that are no longer in use needed to be permanently closed or have a plan to bring them back online, apparently that was all driven from the Paradise Fire. And apparently what happened was there was some issues with cave-ins and weird stuff with old wells. Well, I mean, I don't think our wells can exactly cave in, it's a 4-inch pipe.
And
so when they looked at pardon me?
We're in granite too. It's not going to cave.
Exactly. So what we talked about was the fact that we were tight on money and we were rebuilding our reserves, and that closing wells permanently wasn't a high priority financially. They didn't have any problem with that as long as we had a plan going forward. So what seemed to make the most sense to them and to me and Albert when we talked about it was the 2 wells at the bottom, one at Lakedale and one at the bottom of Riverwood. Those will never be used again. I mean, nobody's ever going to pump water back uphill. They probably should have never been built in the first place. So those could be permanently closed. And then now with the new SCADA system, it's obvious that well 1 out on Highway 78 and well 5 could be brought back online one day if needed, because the way you can now run the wells, you're probably drawing water from the same aquifer or the same areas underground, because 1, 5, 8, and 10 are all in a straight line basically. So bringing those back on would make a lot of sense if needed one day. So I think it's basically just having a plan ready for the State Water Board if and when they say something about it. But it wasn't something that we had an edict of a date and a time. It was just something they wanted us to do going forward.
Yeah, we're already a bit in default on that. We missed last year's task. But fortunately, we haven't heard anything about that. So we're going to have a big problem on well 6. I think I'm the only person who's been down there among us.
I think you are.
In recent times, and it is a terrible situation as regards access. We'll have to rebuild the road to get any kind of equipment down there. I'd like to put it off as long as humanly possible, because it will be expensive. And well, I agree completely that well 1 is a good candidate for rejuvenation. It's a shallow well. It's got everything right there. It's got the feed pipe, it's got the electricity, it's got road access, and the electricity is even on. It doesn't, it doesn't reach the well, but it does there is a service drop, which is live. So, and also interestingly, it seems you mentioned that all these wells are in a line, and that is true. It's following what the geologists call a linear or an apparent fracture zone where water is likely to be available. But well, one is at the intersection of two fracture lines or two linears, because there's also that very obvious gulch that goes down following the highway down the hill.
Right.
So it could be a good fracture zone, which will give us a good amount of water. And we have had luck before getting water well beyond that depth, getting good producing fracture zones. We could also get unlucky, and it could be a fracture zone which actually takes the water away. That we never know.
Right.
But I would fully support what you say about rejuvenating well number 1. And the same applies pretty much to well number 5. That's a shallow well. It could be a much better well. And, I think you've indicated to me that a lot of the cost is not in the drilling, it's actually in all the subsequent expenses, bringing in piping, electricity, and all the equipment and the fencing.
When I looked into it, I was told today to do a 1,000-foot well could cost $250,000 from start to finish, whereas to retrofit an existing well could be 30,000 or 40,000 tops. So it makes sense. I would suggest going forward, until the State Water Board reaches out to WWD and says we want to do an on-site inspection, or we want to revisit where you guys are and what you're doing, I have a feeling you could just sit on your hands knowing you have a plan and wait until someone from above directs what you should be doing and what you should be focused on as far as closing wells permanently and how that all will work on a timeline.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've looked at your plan. I mean, it certainly looks good to me. I'm in complete agreement with it. And so we've done that. We've done what they specifically asked us to do. We haven't been energetic about following your plan, but that's because of our relative poverty and the extreme old age of our residents. And
well, the nice thing is just recently we got contacted by the company that did the bid on well 2 shutdown, and then Buddy Seaford, who's our water manager now, is also talking to another entity that he works with in the Julian Water District to get a price for well 2 shutdown. So that's actually in progress right now. I would say it's the plan, Tim, that you got sign off effectively from the county it has begun.
Good. And the other thing, just to be aware, when you're talked to by the State Water Board, the plan that I had worked out with Victoria and with Jamel McCullough was that, they knew that when we took over 5 years ago, there was no money in the bank and we were rebuilding reserves. So they understood that there were other priorities that were much more pressing for the water district, as the SCADA system has now proven.
Yes.
And closing wells and spending money unnecessarily for something that doesn't affect water quality isn't really a high priority. And they understood that completely. So I don't think there'll be any issue with the State Water Board on that front either.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Now, do you know Jamel very well?
Who? Jamel?
Yeah.
Jamel McCullough. Yeah, she's the supervisor. She was the one who ran the department that Victoria reported to Jamel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Jamel very well.
Has she ever
been? Now I'm in touch. Pardon me?
Has she ever been out to see our facilities?
She was the very first one when we took over, and I had hired Southcott and Dan Toner to be water operator right after we took over in January. She did the on-site inspection. She's the one who uncovered the inappropriate chlorination problem and the fact that well 11 had no fence. That was all Jamel.
Yes.
So yeah, she's very familiar with the system and very familiar with the history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now prior to our taking over, women were not allowed to visit Wynola Water District.
How could that
because of the problems with certain water operators in the past being disparaging to the women at DEH. So they were out there for the first time.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible, but I believe you.
Yeah. So I think, Jim, I think you'll be in good shape once you figure out who the water district supervisor is at the state level. I have a feeling that one of the things that's going to be an issue is that the state water board has such a huge responsibility and so few people that work there. You might not hear from them for a year or two. I don't know.
Maybe 5. Maybe we'll get lucky.
Well, our goal is to do everything that the county and you had agreed to, get those things implemented. And should we get contacted, they should just check us off the list because, you know, as we reported at the board meeting even today, our goal is to have the most safe and reliable water that we possibly can have for our residents.
Well, I think you, Tim, you established that legacy of whatever foundation of trust we have with the regulators. Now they know.
Absolutely.
Until they see otherwise, they know that we're trying to comply as best we can.
And make it better than it's been.
Mm-hmm. Now, the only other well that can be a bit problematic is well number 8, which is close to well 10. And actually our power drop from SDG&E is right there at well number 8, as you know. And then it feeds underground to well number 10, which is in operation. But the plumbing is disconnected. But the well bore still exists. And
so we pull up the map.
We're going
maybe we should pull up the map and then you could we can kind of mark for people so they could see. Let me reduce this down a bit and kind of go over to that corner where
there down there is 10.
Down on the bottom right hand corner of the screen is well 8 and 10. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so 8 is up above 10. So that's where the electric power comes in and all the wiring goes through well 8.
Drag it over here.
Because well 8 pre-existed well 10, but it was not a very productive well. So, I mean, what I would hope we can do is convince any regulator that the fence is there. We can fill the bore of the well if they insist, but we would rather have it as a metering well in order to see what the undisturbed water level is for well 10. Kind of the way we use well 5 now as a metering well to establish the general condition of the aquifer.
Albert, can I interrupt you for 1 sec?
Please do.
I was under the impression, as was DEH, that well 8 is completely functional. It's just turned off.
No, well, the pipe is disconnected at the top and it has not been used for years. It could be run. The motor might possibly function. I don't know. But in my history, it has not run.
Okay, well, one of the things that I would look at, because one of the things that DEH said is if we just hooked it back up and took samples from it and submitted samples, and once they passed the samples, it could just be brought back online. But everybody I had talked to 5 years ago.
Uh-oh, he froze.
I think
Did we lose you there, Tim? Shoot. The internet gods are messing with us.
Whoops. There's some motion.
Oh,
can you hear us?
Oh, there he's coming back online.
Yeah, I can hear
you there for a minute with an unstable internet connection. Sorry.
Oh, what I was saying is 5 years ago, I was under the impression that well 8, the pump worked, the electrical worked, everything worked, and it just was taken out of use purely because it interfered with well 10. But it could be brought back online with a simple water test, sample test, and be put back into use if necessary. So DEH didn't really have 8 as a concern. They just thought of it as a well that was ready to come back online if it was needed.
Good. Well,
whereas
we could very cheaply, since it's not connected to the water feed line, it's separate. We could very cheaply, I think, just start the thing up and blow the water out onto the ground and see if it works.
Yeah, and measure the flow.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, because, well 1 and well 5 will both need pumps and maybe drilling and some updating, whereas well 8 just needs maybe a little water testing and sampling.
Yeah.
And I think that was on your list of wells to bring back online, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think the way DEH looked at it is, if it was meant to be brought back online, that meant we were taking care of it. The fence was in place. Everything was up to snuff so that it wouldn't collapse. Somebody wouldn't fall in a hole. The stuff they were worried about with after Paradise, which really doesn't apply to us, but that's where the edict was coming from. As long as our wells are fenced like they are, they really had no problem with the delay in closing or bringing them back on. Well, it was more about maintaining them.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. That's a good thing.
So what are some other things, Tim, that you wanted to get Albert to comment on that perhaps would give us some perspective and historical info?
Well, one of the other things, since we were talking about grants and the small storage tank, when we took over 5.5 years ago, the prior group had pretty much signed off on a quote from the people who were building the tank, Superior, to rebuild the small tank. We held off on that. There was no money. And we thought, let's just let tank 2, the 44,000 gallon tank, operate until it blew a hole or leaked like tank 1 did. I'm curious as to, Albert, what your thinking is 6 years later. That tank has been holding up really well and doesn't seem to have any problems. Do you think it might still have life left, or should it be a higher priority looking to replace tank 2?
Let me just, before Albert answers that, he hasn't seen the report. We just got it at about 8:40 last night from the tank inspection company, and I shared it with the board today. And the results on that tank are not good. They consider the roof poor. They noted a lot of rusting both inside and the outside. Between the 65K tank and the 44K tank, it was not a good report. I'm just curious, do you remember, Tim, what they said the cost might be? That was a question today that was asked in light body, and nobody that was in the room, because we're all new, couldn't answer it. What was the cost, do you recall, off the top of your head, to replace that 45 or 44K tank?
$50,000, 50.
Okay, well, that's a lot less than I would have guessed. But anyhow, I wanted to just give you that information, Albert, before you answered the question, because you haven't had a chance yet to read the technical report. Right. It just came in late last night.
Right. Well, it could fail tomorrow. It could fail 10 years from now. It's a very old tank.
Well, it's one of the original tanks, isn't it?
I'm thinking it 1994.
Oh, okay.
So that makes it a pretty old tank. Now, when a tank fails, it might not fail catastrophically. I mean, Julian is full of water tanks which have leaked in the sidewalls, and then they put in a plug with an elastomeric washer on it, and they wait until the next leak comes along, and they do that. The roof may look pretty bad, but as long as it doesn't actually become dangerous or start dropping stuff into the water, it doesn't necessarily have to be replaced. The floor plan, the floor is, they seldom have trouble with that because there's a fine layer of sediment that always gathers there. And I remember before they changed out the big tank, I went topside and I looked down in it, and I could still see every carriage bolt head in the bottom plate.
Well, and now if I may just interject, the report that came from the tank inspection company is they were not able to do any photographs inside the tank because both tanks had almost zero visibility due to turbidity and sediment. And this was before they entered the tanks, which is just endemic of the water quality problem we're experiencing right now in the community.
I would disagree with that finding because you and I were there and I opened up the bottom tap and the water that came out was not visibly turbid. And in the old tank, we opened the big, 4-inch gate valve and blew water out halfway to the street. And it was reasonably clear water. So I think any turbidity arose after they were going in there. But to return to what I was saying, I think the floor can be pretty good. But of course, the problem that we had was at the bottom flange, and that's where all of our problems get focused. If we can save the bottom flange, which is impossible to ever clean, ever repair, we know that from bitter experience, then we could get quite a few years out of that tank, because it's now being
Jim,
by the same silt that deprives the iron of any oxygen for its corrosion. So I think we just leave it alone.
The divers that came in, were they independent divers or do they work for a company that does stuff for tanks? I'm just curious.
Yeah, they're a tank inspection company. They do tank inspection all over the United States.
Because, one thing I found in the files, looking at what happened with the first, the big 66,000 gallon tank replacement, it was interesting that the cleaning of that tank was put on the schedule basically by tank people. And it's interesting that they're the ones who did the work, and all of a sudden the tank fell apart and broke. And I always wonder if there's an independent group that looks at these things that has no motive of, oh, your water's dirty, you need to flush or you need to replace, because they have no vested interest in that.
I think there's a profit motive everywhere where there possibly can be profit. And I would independently verify everything that any tank inspector said.
Oh, absolutely.
And but we've opened both tanks at the bottom. We're putting our trust in that. I mean, Kent is installing a pressure transducer at the very bottom of tank number 1. We're trusting it not to be full of muck. And of course, we'll be flushing it periodically to keep the transducer clear. Also, the main pressure tank out there, it hadn't been open for many years, but I was able to put a pipe on the valve and very gingerly open it up and blow out the center tank, blow out the pressure tank too, in 2 places. And because there's also a small spigot at the bypass pipe, and then there's the big 2-inch ball valve where you really get a tremendous jet of water blowing out into the orchard. That also comes out clear. There's always some initial discoloration because there is sediment at the bottom. But general turbidity in the tank, I say absolutely not.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was talking to a water guy, about a month after I left, and one of the things he was saying that they were finding up north is that due to the drought, they were pulling more minerals out of the ground into their system. Now they had a filtration system and chlorination, but he said they really noticed how their filters needed to be cleaned more frequently, and they blamed it on the drought.
I think that'll happen this summer. We're looking at a severe drought this summer. Our well levels could be rising, and they're not, they're falling. And this is a La Nina year. I think we have to save all the water we can. And I think we have to expect that our well levels will go down this summer and fall, and we will probably be getting into much more mineralization of the water. It's an upcoming problem, and it's not one that we can really do much about. We might have to start introducing conservation measures early.
Yeah. That's basically.
I think you're dropping out, Tim.
Oh, dropped again. Hold on, Tim.
To get Albert to talk about, we've pretty much covered. Maybe you have questions, I'm not sure.
Anything else, Albert, that you would add just for the good of the order on the system? I mean, you've basically given us a glowing report that we're moving in the right direction.
We certainly are. I see it's flashing up a message that the internet connection is unstable. We knew that already.
Either that or the people on the screen are unstable. I mean, I'll include
yeah,
myself.
I mean, look at that. How much can you expect?
Tim, you resemble that remark.
There you go.
But I think you did a great job, Tim. We didn't always agree at the outset, but I think after some back and forth and discussion and rationalization, I think we always did agree in the end. And yes. I'm proud of that time. You know, we got through.
Thank you.
We came on board with one of our best pumps dead. It had been dead for a week, as I recall. Shortly after that, we lost another well, the other good well that we had. And that was at a time when we had very little money. And, well, we pulled back from that brink.
Well, I'll weigh in and give a lot of credit to Tim for the efforts that he took in terms of putting this whole financial place back in good footing. I mean, well, I think, Tim, the story you said when you took over, you had no money. As I mentioned today, we probably, well, before the SCADA system bill is paid, we had about $380,000 sitting in the bank. That's a far cry from when you took over. And we need to give the community to give you a lot of credit for putting this water district on solid financial footing.
Well, thank you. I think, you know, the thing that I want to leave with you guys is just, I had no background in water. I didn't care about water other than the fact that I drank it and my animals drank it and I used it in the garden. But I had no bias as to how things should be run or what should be done. I just looked to the regulators to tell us, here's what you need to do, and here's how you need to get it done. And that's pretty much what we did. And without Albert's help, I would have never gotten it done. And I think the reason the money's in the bank is we just kept things low expense and tried to operate the best we could, knowing that SCADA was going to be necessary, filtration might be necessary, chlorination might be necessary, because times are changing and the drought's going to change what you suck out of those wells. And there's going to have to be something you do on the customer end to make everybody happy. So I feel like I left it in good hands. And I think, Jim, because you've got water experience, you're much more sophisticated than I was, and you'll be able to get everything done as needed.
Well, it's definitely a team effort. It's not about any one person. I got to say, Albert has taught me a lot. He and I have had our disagreements, but same thing, you know, we'll figure it out. We go forward. We're blessed with having people like Ron Plaka, who's around in the community, and a really good board of directors now that is voting unanimously, and we're getting things done. And, you know,
absolutely.
I am fiscally prudent on things. I don't like spending money if we can avoid it. but we have had to spend a little bit of money right now just to get things into position. And as you said, Tim, we know what's next. We know that we may be having to filter the water. We may have to be treating the water. We are looking at grants right now that will replace the entire mainline system. And thank you, Tim, for assisting us in that effort. You and Buddy are working on a couple of USDA grants right now at opportunities. It's a Hail Mary pass, but if we can get something to where you can get a grant to replace our main system, we aren't going to dig up the existing mains. We're just going to install new pipes parallel and then connect it in. And those are things we're looking at. We'll see what happens.
We promise not to mess up your good work.
Yes.
That's a solemn promise.
There you go.
Well, thank you.
The recording on this note before we say our goodbyes, but this has been an effort to share with the community some historical perspective from two absolutely wonderful water experts, Tim and Albert. They may not have started as water experts in the Wynola Water District, but they are, and the community is indebted to their service.